5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
This is the Culture Clash.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Equipment. And hopefully you can hear me now, and we are good to go. So again, welcome to the latest episode of Culture Clash here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Off to a fun Friday start, obviously. It's been that kind of week, but we are here. We are doing our latest episode, and we are glad to have you join in the chat and have everything going on. We hope everybody is doing well. We got a fun episode tonight. It's time to visit some Fandom Oblivion this week. We haven't been here in a while, but we were looking at the 2010 film Skyline. Hopefully our brains don't get sucked out and put into alien bodies before the end of this episode. You just never know. But you know what? Kevin is still off in Australia. I'm starting to wonder if he's ever going to come back. He might decide to stay there. I don't know. Maybe he's already had his brain sucked out by an alien. But there is no need to fear, because we are talking about Fandom Oblivion, which means we're talking about a movie. And there is nobody better than somebody we have here on the Fandom Podcast Network to talk about movies, because she is the queen of movie foo. She is the one and only Miss Lacey Adderhold.
Hello. There we go. Skyline.
How are you doing, Miss Lacey?
Well, it's been a week. We should not talk about it.
We're not going to here. We're here to have some fun, relax, and chill out.
Exactly. Talk about moving to other countries. Anyway,
Kevin's already there.
So I was like, when you said he might not come back, I was like, best decision he's made all week. Good call. Anyway, yeah, so super excited to talk about Skyline and decide whether or not it should be raised from Oblivion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but you know what? This is Culture Clash, the flagship show of the Fandom Podcast Network, and you know, hopefully you are joining us either live on our YouTube channel, or if you're listening to this on one of our great podcast feeds, whether it's fpnet.podbean.com or on iTunes or iHeartRadio or any of those great podcast catchers out there. We're so glad you joined us. And of course, we do other things here at the Fandom Podcast Network. It isn't just about Culture Clash, because we cover a wide variety of things, and we've got we have a lot of fun stuff coming out right now. And so our good friends over at What a Piece of Junk, the guys on the Drunken Gungan, Scott, Derek, and Nathan, they just put out their latest episode, and they're talking all things Skeleton Crew, because the latest and final trailer for Skeleton Crew dropped last week. And Lacey, we talked about this a little bit on our last episode of Culture Clash. I'm really excited now for this show. This last trailer sold me. I'm looking forward to some fun. Maybe some kind of has a little bit of Stranger Things type feel with some references and stuff like that. We know it's Disney Plus. We had the conversation about, wanting multiple seasons, but I'm more intrigued about this show now than I have been since the beginning of the announcements.
Yeah, I'm deliberately. Can you hear me? We get the audio.
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, you're good.
I'm deliberately not watching any more, trailers, because that's just, I don't. These days, you watch a trailer, you know what happens, you're done. I will say I love the fact that the guys over at What a Piece of Junk were able to do a full podcast on like a 3-minute, because that's how we are. Like, dude, Star Wars nerds, awesome. Like, you can take 3 minutes and talk for an hour, just like, and that, and I love that. Those are my people. Yep. I love it.
We are all the people here at the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, too, speaking of people in Australia, our good friend Adam O'Brien, the Lethal Mullet himself, for you Blood of Kings fans out there too, he dove into Highlander 3, which, over in Australia and over in other places, is entitled The Sorcerer. Of course, it's the third film with Mario Van Peebles in it. This is where some people might feel like, Highlander may have went off the rails a little bit because it got really confusing. But a lot of people also feel that way about Highlander too, depending on who you talk to. But he did a little podcast on Highlander 3. He's got some fun stuff coming up, including one Lacey and I were part of, the Boondock Saints, which will be coming up very soon on the Lethal Mullet. And of course, too, over on the True Believers podcast, our MCU show, we have been covering everything that's been Agatha all along. We just wrapped up with the final 2 episodes that came out. I was joined by our good friend Kat Cedar and Derek Marsh from the What a Piece of Junk podcast for doing that. And hey, look at this. Joining us from Australia, it is Mr. Reitzel. It is always good to know that Kevin is being part of the chat. He's probably shaking his head at me after the technical difficulties right at the start of the show. And of course, he liked Highlander. He loves everything Highlander. But you know what? We miss you, Kevin, but we know you're going to be back soon and back on the FPNet airways, and we're looking forward to it. And of course, you know, hello to the lovely Mrs. Reitzel, the lovely Aaron Reitzel-Gill as well. You know, but we're going to get back. We're going to have to play a little catch up because a lot of stuff to talk about since you've been gone, and we got to get your opinions back up on that. But yes, Agatha all along, a tour de force show of Catherine Hahn, the wonderful Catherine Hahn. And guys, we had a lot of opinions about how this show wrapped up. Give it a check out, True Believers, here on the Fandom Podcast Network. But we're not done. Oh, no. Because Union Federation, the final season of Star Trek Lower Decks has arrived. That the craziness and the fun of Lower Decks begin. We are covering this season all out on the Union Federation podcast. It's Lower Decks. We're going to have some crazy fun. And you know what? We're recording our next episode here shortly. And I'm just saying there might be a discussion about Klingon death metal. We you know, so we've got interesting things happening on the craziest ship in the fleet. Let's just put it that way. And of course, Time Warp. You know, we've been covering the year of 1984. October is the most recent episode. Some classic films in this. The Terminator, Body Double. Some interesting films as well, Lacey. This is back when we're at a day where the movies weren't quite so spread out. Everything big hit in the summer, and then we kind of started trailing off and getting into some weird stuff for a few months. Where I think now we.
You mean the Land of Yik-Yak?
Oh well, yeah. That a few other things and a crazy Brian De Palma film all wrapped up into 1 month. Mm-hmm. Go check it out, and of course, you know what? We will be back with November. Very soon for Time Warp.
Yes.
And Kevin had a little fun over at the hair metal with the sleaze meter. I'm gonna have to have a talk with him about that. I warned him about that. But the VH1 Top 40 Hair Metal Bands from 2001, and yes, that is a VHS tape that Kevin still owns on the cover for hair metal. He brought together the hair metal. You know, some might call it the Supreme Court of Hair Metal. People might call it the hair metal council. You know, but they got together, had this great conversation. If you're a fan of 80s hair metal, you check out the Hair Metal podcast, and this one's really fun. I kept trying to get Kevin to hire the VH1 voiceover guy from back in the day, but apparently his prices are just out of our budget. So what are you gonna do? Also, too, is that we have a culture clash, and you know what? We're doing Skyline now, but I got to give a quick shout out. Last week's episode, we had a ton of fun talking Voyagers with Kevin, making a connection from Australia. And of course, our good friend and co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Norman Lau. And we had a lot of fun. Lacey, did you fix your Omni yet? Did you get it cleaned up? Because mine keeps flashing red. I don't know what I've done to the timeline.
Well, I know there's something wrong with the timeline right now.
On that note, we are here to talk about Skyline and Fandom Oblivion, but we have a lot of other fun things to talk about here on the Fandom Podcast Network in this episode of Culture Clash. So, without further ado,
let's news.
And Lacey, there's been some interesting news this week. Some things I've been pretty excited about here. And the first 2 pieces in our news are things I'm curious about your take on them.
Okay.
First and foremost, Stranger Things season 5. It is coming out in 2025. Finally, the final season premieres in 2025, and will follow up on the town-shaking events of season 4. they've added some people this season. Linda Hamilton, Nell Fisher, Jake Connolly, and Alex Bro are all joining the cast for the last run of episodes. But one of the fun things about Stranger Things, Lacey, that I've always enjoyed were the episode titles and how they tied into things. And Netflix dropped a teaser trailer here this week, and it was interesting. But they dropped the names of the episodes. So I'm just going to throw these out here real quick. First episode is The Crawl. The second episode, The Vanishing of, and this is blanked out. It's been redacted, so we don't know. But somebody's obviously vanishing in Stranger Things season 5. The Turbo Trap, Sorcerer, Shock Jock, Escape from Kamazotz, Escape from Kamazotz, The Bridge, and the final episode, The Right Side Up. So, Lacey, I'm going to ask you, because we go back what seems like a lifetime ago, pre-COVID, Stranger Things was an absolute phenomenon.
Yes.
I am still a huge fan of Stranger Things, but are you excited to finally be getting the end of Stranger Things? I mean, it's been delayed because of COVID, but creative writer strikes. These kids are definitely grown up immensely since the show started with all these delays.
Yeah.
But I did feel like season 4 kind of brought back some of that Stranger Things magic. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I have like a weird love-hate relationship with Stranger Things. I'm not a horror person. I'm not a horror fan. But and we won't talk about where I used to live, but I used to live in a complex in Atlanta, and several of the cast lived there. Charlie and Natalia and Winona lived there during shooting. And so I would see them in elevators and hallways and at the lockers, to get packages and whatnot. And Charlie is just the nicest fella. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I gotta watch this show because I want to be able to be like, oh, you were, I wanted to be able to be like, oh, you were great in last week's episode. So I came into it like 2 seasons late. Now I'm obsessed with it, and they waited like 2 years to give me what I need. What is happening? And now I've moved, so I can't even be like, hey guys, what's up? Like, tell me the things, nothing. I don't even get even like little bits or anything. So, but yeah, it's true that cast is like just super close knit. Everyone is super nice. Or at least I've met a fair number of them. But yeah, so I started watching it because I had met several of the people, and now I'm just ready to go. Honestly, I'm a binge watcher. So when I watch Netflix, I literally just put it on go, and I don't know that I ever knew that the names of the episodes were. Yeah. I don't know any of the names of any of the episodes. It never occurred to me, because they didn't. They used to name the episodes way back in the day, but then they kind of stopped. In the mid 90s. So it makes sense that because this is based back in the, in the 80s, that they would be titled, but it just didn't even occur to me that they would have titles.
Yeah. Go back. Because I am sure a lot of people will be doing a Stranger Things rewatch before season 5 comes out. Pay attention to that. It's quite interesting. But the next piece of news is something I am up to the moon, over. I cannot wait for this. Because if you remember last year, my number one thing that happened in fandom in general last year was Godzilla -1.
Right.
And Toho made a little announcement concerning Godzilla. Because Toho is in development on their next Godzilla film with the writer and director of Godzilla -1 back at the helm. Toho announced on this past Friday that the next film in the franchise is in the works, and that Takashi Yamazaki is back as writer, director, and visual effects supervisor. The announcement was made on Twitter, and there was a video that came out with that. There is no word on the details behind the new film, including whether it will be a direct sequel to Godzilla -1 or not. That film released last year grossed $116 million worldwide against a budget of less than $10 million to become the highest grossing Japanese film in U.S. box office history. It also won an Oscar for best visual effects. Now, Lacey, have you watched Godzilla -1 yet?
I have not. I am a terrible, terrible monster person. I have to be in a specific mood to watch monster movies. Right now might not be a bad time to watch some monster movies. I could watch some monsters like just rip stuff up right now. That might be the next one. I do have it. I did order it. I have it on Blu-ray or 4K. and so I can pull that out at some point and watch it. But no, I have not. I do like the Monarch series that's been kind of with
and they are working on season 2 of that as part of the MonsterVerse here in the U.S. And I mean, I gotta say, it is got the 70th anniversary of Godzilla this year, right now.
So
and
wasn't that the first Oscar that they ever won? After
it was the first Godzilla, first Oscar for visual effects for -1, which is fantastic. I grew up on Godzilla movies as a kid growing up. I love Godzilla. Godzilla has a very special place in my heart, and I am so excited about this. -1 was a phenomenal film. I think what they're doing with the MonsterVerse is just so much fun. They're not the greatest films, but they're fun, and that's what's great about it. And like you, the Monarch series was phenomenal. It is renewed for a second season, so I can't wait for that. And of course, too, greetings programs to Ghostbusters Quick Response Unit. Always glad to have you here with us as well. But Lacey, I have a question for you.
Okay, I have an answer.
Are you ready for more Days of Thunder?
I heard that, and I was like, wait, really? Huh.
Well,
okay.
So let's talk about this, because it's Tom Cruise riding high off of Mission Impossible, but also bringing back Top Gun with Top Gun Maverick and the huge success that was. This makes sense. Days of Thunder is probably one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies, to be honest with you. I love that movie. It's just fun. Yeah. I love Nicole Kidman in that film. Robert Duvall is excellent. It's just one of those, what we call around here a couch potato theater movie in my book. It's one of those movies, if I come across it on cable, I'm stopping, I'm watching it. But yes, Tom Cruise and Paramount Pictures are eyeing a sequel to the 1990 racing film. According to the Hollywood Reporter, that Cruise is speaking with Paramount about a follow-up to the film, with an insider at the studio noting the two are talking about both Top Gun and Days of Thunder, and that it depends on the idea and ultimately the script. I think Days of Thunder has become kind of a cult favorite Tom Cruise film, Lacey.
Yeah, and I also, it's going to be interesting, because once again, they're going to have to recast the female lead, because obviously they divorced. I guess he's 2 divorces out since her. But I love the fact that we have a potential return. I mean, you got Duvall still. Is Duvall still with? Yeah, he's still with us.
Duvall's still with us.
You got oh my gosh, Rowdy. What's his name? Walking Dead. Oh, why can't my brain work right now? I'm
having a brain fart myself at the moment. Here.
I keep
Yondu.
I just keep thinking Merle, and that's not right. But yeah, so I mean, he's huge right now. So I mean, he's been in all the things, so there's no reason not to bring him back.
Michael Rooker.
Thank you, Rooker. Yes. Now we know he had some concussion type things. Wait, did he die?
No, he lived in the movie.
I don't think he did. Okay. But yeah, so I think that there's some fun potential. And I think it could be because the way films are shot now versus the way they were shot in, what was that, 89, 92?
Yeah, I think 80,
what was it?
90.
Okay. Well, when you think about it, I mean, nowadays, when you do a film about racing, you actually get the racers in the movie. Like, this is, I mean, it's not going to be the same as it was, where I think they had like 2 cameos in the box. I
think it was a little more than 2, but not. There at that time too, NASCAR wasn't as big as it is now.
Right. So I think there's some big potential for getting some like really big names in there. Get some. Or you never know, maybe he's going to go to like F1 or something. So it might be set in Morocco or Monaco or whatever, where they're doing all the, who knows? It could go a million different ways.
Yeah. Just don't mess with Cole Trickle. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I love the fact that his name's Cole Trickle. Because my favorite NASCAR driver for like ever was named Dick Trickle.
Yes, I am very familiar with Dick Trickle.
Like, we just rooted for him because we were just like, oh, that poor guy with that name.
Trust me.
It's just such,
Back in the day, Dick Trickle was quite popular with the Sports Center anchor.
Right. I mean, he was good, so I'm very excited. Yeah. I really want them to pay attention to the fact that Tom Cruise is 60 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Tom Cruise, wait. Tom Cruise doesn't pay attention to the fact he's 60 years old.
I understand that. I'm just saying that when, like with Top Gun, at least Jennifer Connelly is a reasonable, not perfect, but a reasonable age for the replacement for Kelly McGillis from the first film, right? I don't want to see him with some like 29-year-old. Like, I just don't. I want him to be like a normal human person with a.
I only have one thing to say to that, Lacey. What is Katie Holmes doing these days?
Not Tom Cruise.
Yeah, that's true. Ghostbusters quick response. I'm assuming this goes to our Stranger Things conversation. I'm partially happy it took so long. Now I'm excited again. Also, not a horror fan, but all the Easter eggs keep me there, and that's one of the magics of Stranger Things, without a doubt. But you know what, guys, that is going to wrap up the Let's News portion of this. But we got other things here. You know, we are the Fandom Podcast Network, and we watch things, which means, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a little bit of buy it, stream it, or unsee it. That is right. It's time for our review section of buy it, stream it, or unsee it. Buy it if you loved it. Stream it if you thought, okay, yeah, it was good. I could watch this, or unsee it. Like, please just wipe that from my memory. And of course, yes, I've got your heart here. Ghostbusters, all Toho Godzilla is good Godzilla. That is very, very true. So, but we have seen a few things around here, and you know what? I watched something kind of begrudgingly. I watched it the other night on election night because you know what? We need to get away from election coverage for a little bit. And before we go any farther, though, on that, spoiler alert, we are going to be diving into these films a little bit deeper. If you have not watched them yet, you don't want to be spoiled, go watch them, come back, join us, and enjoy our reviews. And also a shout out to our good friends at Letterboxd. We love Letterboxd. Kevin, I expect you to be over 700 movies when you come back from Australia. I mean, it seems like that's all you and Aaron have been doing, but you know, hey, that double features that I'm jealous of, 4K, all that good stuff. But yeah, 700, Kevin, I will be counting and I will be checking on your Letterboxd. So anyway, election night needed a little distraction. My roommate had actually rented this because I had heard not good things. It's been considered one of the biggest bombs of the year, but Borderlands, Lacey. Now you even had mentioned, I think last week we talked about this a little bit. You have actually wanted to check out this film because you have no sense of the games it's based off of or anything of that nature. I have played the games. I love the games. They're fun. Heard a lot of bad things about this film. It's an immense cast. When you look at the people who are in this film, you've got Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jack Black doing a voice. You've got Jamie Lee Curtis in this film. There's a ton of people in this film. And this is what I'm going to say about Borderlands. It kind of has that offbeat Fifth Element feel to it a little bit where, you know, it's hits the realms of strange. Is it a good movie? I'm gonna be honest with you. No, because there was times I felt when I was watching this, I felt myself wandering, checking my phone, everything like that. If you're a fan of the games, you're gonna have some issues with it just because of the storyline and things they do. But if you're going in pretty much as a blank slate and you're just a fan of offbeat science fiction, you will probably at least get some entertainment value out of this movie. Jack Black voicing the character of Claptrap is hilarious in this film. He kind of steals the show, but the storyline itself is average. It's kind of weird. It's a weird casting role for Cate Blanchett. I'll be the first to say it. I mean, this is coming from somebody who loves her as Hela in the MCU, but even for this feels just a little bit outside of her box. Like, come on, Kate, you're a little better than this. Kevin Hart. I think some people have oversaturation of Kevin Hart at this point. I'm just like, he was there in this film. Jamie Lee Curtis. It's one of those films. It was there. It had some good moments, Lacey. But for me, it would be a stream it. You know, check it out if you're curious about it. Check it out if you just want a couple hours of mindless entertainment. I can see where people are not going to like it. I see where people are going to say, okay, well, it was a fun little film for what it was. So yeah, it's a stream it for me, Lacey.
Gotcha. I heard someone who described it as Buckaroo Banzai trying to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but like covered in Lisa Frank stickers from like the late 80s.
That's a good way. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, I think this is what Netflix was made for. This is the kind of movie that Netflix was made for.
Yeah.
Streaming services were made for. You throw it on the streaming service. This probably should have never made it to the theaters, but it did because of the cast in it.
Yeah.
But this is
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I'm still interested in seeing it, and like I said, you know, like you said, I haven't done the video game at all, so I'm coming into it completely fresh. It's just like I'm ready for like a weird sci-fi comedy weirdness, and that's fine for me. I think that I give a little bit more leeway than most, just because, you know, I have a degree in screenwriting and I know how hard it is to write a screenplay. So I give a lot of, like, when I see a movie, I'm like, oh, well, that's weird. Okay, cool. That's what you needed to move the plot along. Let's get it. Okay, you know, I can usually find something interesting or something fun about any movie, with a few exceptions. So I'm looking forward to it. Still, I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen it yet, but I am looking forward to watching it. And you know, we'll see how maybe it'll be on the next Culture Clash for me.
yeah, well, there you go. So okay, next up, Lacey, is a documentary that I saw come up on Disney Plus. I remember hearing about it, but it kind of slipped my mind. That is Music by John Williams. Of course, if you're watching this show, you probably have a pretty good idea of who John Williams is. This documentary is beautiful. This is such a tribute to John Williams. And the thing I loved about this documentary is it doesn't just focus on his career scoring movies. It focuses on him being a jazz musician, when he was doing television, there's still themes today I did not realize John Williams composed. And I'm like, wow, really? To see his genuine friendship with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas as well, and the fact that Steven Spielberg really had to sell him on doing Star Wars, is fantastic. And just to see the genius of this man, there's a great part where he talks about doing with Spielberg how he went from 3 notes on the Jaws theme to 5 notes for Close Encounters, and he just worked up from there.
Nice.
But Lacey, this is just an absolutely beautiful documentary and such a tribute to him. Is truly what we would call a legend. A legend. I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't know if this was covered in the documentary, but I feel like his conversations with, you know, with Steven Spielberg and getting, you know, doing Jaws and doing things like Close Encounters, getting him into the sci-fi of it all, I feel like that's directly related to him doing things like superhero movies. We wouldn't have Superman.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
and they talk about Superman. They do talk about Superman in this, and they pull a great snippet from Christopher Reeve when they were on for something honoring John Williams, and he's like, "Yeah, without that music, I take 2 steps and fall flat on my face."
Right. That's actually my dad's ringtone in my phone. When my dad calls me, it does the Superman ringtone. It's one of my favorites.
But I mean, they talk about, like I said, him growing up, the influence he had on his children, and I know I heard this somewhere, but I couldn't. But when they revealed it in the documentary, that his son was the lead singer for Toto, and I had forgotten about that. So that was like, oh yeah, that. But just, you know, they talk about him doing the Schindler's List score. They talk about Jurassic Park. They hit all the big ones, but they hit a lot of little ones too. And they even talk about his time when he was the lead conductor for the Boston Pops, which is a really interesting flame because he actually quit. He quit for like a 6-week period because of how, at that time, within the orchestra things, they didn't take people who did movie score seriously. It was you were a lower level. And so the disrespect he felt like he was getting and certain things like that. So it's really interesting. But they hit all of the main notes. Spielberg is a huge part of this. Ron Howard is in this as well. But the magic of the relationship of him and Spielberg and seeing them just talking and just their genuine friendship, but also 2 of the greatest 2 people who've changed movies for forever. And just watching that on screen is just, if you're a movie fan, it's powerful. It truly is powerful. And there's a scene where he has this very old notebook, and it's all the music he wrote for Close Encounters.
Oh wow!
And it's just, and they talk about, he wrote most of the stuff overnight. It wasn't like he sat for months writing this stuff out. He was doing this stuff in like days, which is just mind blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, I saw a documentary or like one of the behind the scenes features. I want to it might have been E.T. or it might have been I don't know. All the Steven Spielberg one. It might have been. Anyway, it was a behind the scenes about the music, and he was talking about how when it comes to Steven, when he tells you what he's doing and what the film is going to be about and how it's going to be laid out, and he said that Steven Spielberg is so able to paint like a verbal picture even beforehand, and then once he sees it, he says it just comes to him, because it's just, I mean, the way the filmmaking is, it's he said that the way Steven portrays everything, it just makes he said it makes the music just happen. And I was like, wow, okay, I wish I could make music happen like that. Like,
well,
like he's like that, there's a talent that gives you the ability to make that happen.
And one of the things, and Kevin, if you're still watching, I don't know if you are or not, but there's a great section 2 where they talk about him scoring the Indiana Jones films.
That might have been where the interview was from.
And there's a great moment with I can't think of the name of the actor. He played Short Round in Temple of Doom.
Kwan.
And he talks about how they were at the Oscars the prior year, and he was sitting next to Steven Spielberg, and then John Williams was sitting behind him, and Steven Spielberg was like, "You realize you're one of the few men he wrote a individual score for," and they both started humming the score at the same time. Williams and Keith started humming the score at the same time, and it's just how much that connection was still there even after all these years.
Nice. I'm totally gonna watch this, and I'm gonna cry. Okay.
Yeah. It's on Disney Plus. That's where you can find it. I would say for me to buy it. It was that good and that educational, and just to have that, I would, if they ever put it out in a way you could buy it, I would definitely buy it. If you are a movie fan of any kind, you need to watch this documentary and appreciate what we have with John Williams and what he has done for us. And it's phenomenal, and it's definitely check it out. So now, Lacey, we do have Veterans Day right around the corner. As this recording, it'll be just in a few days. And first of all, thank you to all of our veterans out there for your service. You guys are much appreciated, and thank you. But Lacey, you kind of did something that I didn't realize, put the pieces together until earlier today when you told me you watch this. I'm like, wait a minute, okay, you have been watching a bunch of military comedies lately.
Yes. Wacky military hijinks is kind of one of my favorite little like subgenres. I have let's see, in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, I've watched Stripes, McHale's Navy, Private Benjamin, Sergeant Bilko, Down Periscope, Major Payne, the series Enlisted, and then the original McHale's Navy, but I'm in the middle of that, and that's like 4 seasons, I think. So I'm still in the middle of that, but I've been doing all my fun, crazy military hijinks. Private Benjamin.
Okay, so then I have to ask you, Lacey. I mean, most of these are classics. Which one is probably your favorite of that bunch?
It's so funny. I mean, Stripes is classic. It is 100%. And I did watch MASH. That's what kind of started it off. I watched MASH, and I was like, okay, now I just got to keep going. So, I think, as far as the old school stuff, it's gonna be Stripes. But I think the newer things, if you haven't watched Enlisted, it's a TV show from like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. It was Jeff Stoltz, and a couple other, like, just it's really funny. I think it was like I think it was 1 season. It might have been 2. It's a single packet, when you buy it on DVD. But it's so funny. And also Steve Martin as Sergeant Bilko is phenomenal. I mean, it's really hard to choose. Now I'm like, oh, but Private Benjamin was Whoopi. I mean, why is my brain saying Whoopi Goldberg when it's
Yeah.
Goldie Hawn? Like, I don't know where
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg came from, but Whoopi Goldie, whatever. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go Stripes and Sergeant Bilko for the movies, and then for the TV show, I'd say Enlisted. Definitely fun.
Yeah. For me, Stripes, if you're going to go military comedy, Stripes is number
Right.
one. I mean, John Larroquette, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, John Candy, all of them, the RV, all of it. Stripes is way up there. It's funny, Lacey, because you talked about how you watched MASH starting all this. And see, for me, I grew up on the TV series of MASH.
Oh, yeah.
And so watching the original film is still, it's still kind of weird to me to see the different castings and everything like that. But I know it's considered a class. I will always remember the scene from Private Benjamin in the shower with the blue dye.
Eileen Brennan, that woman, I tell you what, she was in so many like kind of quintessential films for me, between Private Benjamin and Clue. I mean, just so, she was so great, and she was always kind of the female version of like a curmudgeon. I don't know if is there a female word for that? Is there a feminized word for that word?
Curmudgeon is curmudgeon.
She was a curmudgeon, yeah. And it was just fantastic. I love her and all the things.
Quick shout out to Ghostbusters Quick Response Unit from our John Williams conversation. Still have to see it, but after what they did with the Jim Henson documentary, which I highly recommend as well. I know I want to see it. Go see it. Go watch it. It's emotional. It's fantastic. I promise you will learn something about John Williams from this documentary. So, that is going to wrap up the things we've seen, but we were about to dive into something else. I'm going to quote the great Orson Welles from his final role, which, if you don't know, is one of my all-time favorite films, Transformers the movie. His voicing of the character Unicron as he tells one of the many Transformers, "Proceed on your way to Oblivion." That is right. It is time for some Fandom Oblivion. And if you're not familiar with Fandom Oblivion, this is where we take some films that maybe had some notoriety when they came out for one reason or another, but have kind of gone by the wayside. And this is an interesting one we have. And Lacey, this was actually at your suggestion. The movie we are going to be floating around the black hole that is Oblivion is Skyline from 2010. Very interesting. This is going to be an interesting conversation, but let me the quick IMDb plot synopsis. A strange lights descend on the city of Los Angeles, drawing people outside like moths to a flame, where the extraterrestrial force threatens to swallow the entire human population off the face of the earth. Now, the directors for this film were Colin and Greg Strauss. It was written by Joshua Cortez and Liam O'Neill. There's a couple of names you might recognize in here. Eric Balfour, who I know, Lacey, you are an absolute huge fan of. Yep. You have Scotty Thompson, Brittany Daniel, Crystal Reed, Neil Hopkins, Donald Faison is in this film. Now, I'm trying to remember, is this pre-Scrubs or was Scrubs going on at this time?
I want to say 2007 was probably middle. It was probably on hiatus.
2010. So
yeah, I feel like Scrubs was like 2007-ish.
Yeah.
Moving forward, I'll have to check on that.
Now, I remember when this film came out, Lacey, and I was actually a little bit fascinated by it because just the visual of this film was really impressive. I mean, you look at these two movie posters that they put out for it, and that's an impressive thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, they look impressive, and this film visually is quite a stunning film for some of the visual effects, especially when you consider the budget that it worked on. But Lacey, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper on here and give everybody out there who might not be familiar with Skyline a little bit deeper of the plot synopsis here. So if you bear with me for just a minute.
Do it to it.
Jared and his wife Elaine arrive in Los Angeles, California for Jared's best friend Terry's birthday party. They celebrate with Terry's wife Candace and his assistant Denise. During a private argument about whether or not they should move, Elaine reveals she is pregnant. The next morning, blue lights descend from the sky, hypnotizing anybody who looks at them. Every hypnotized person becomes zombie-like and immobilized, and then they are collected by light machines. This is the work of several alien ships that descend from the sky, Jared is about to be taken when Terry tackles him. The two escape the alien drones and meet up with Elaine. Back in the condominium, Terry looks for his neighbor Walt so they can all leave in Walt's car. As Terry and Walt are hiding, Walt's dog runs towards the creature. Walt tries to stop it and gets abducted. Jared believes the open water would be a safer place since there are no machines over the sea. They encounter a bickering couple, Colin and Jen, and are preparing to flee the building. As Terry's car exits the garage, it is flattened by a massive four-legged alien, killing Denise. Terry escapes, but is abducted as he flees. The remaining survivors retreat into the garage. There they encounter another alien life form in the shape of a large multi-tentacled squid that corners the rest of the group before the building's concierge Oliver slams into it with an SUV. In the ensuing fight, the squid creature sucks out Colin's brain to replace its own brain. Jen joins the group but is abducted as they run back into the building. The four survivors remain hiding in the condominium. The next day, the U.S. Air Force launches an attack against the alien spaceship and flying alien drones using stealth unmanned combat aerial vehicles and conventional drone aircraft. Only one stealth plane pierces the carnage and fires a nuclear missile, hitting the mothership before it is destroyed. The detonation blows the ship apart. Unfortunately, the aliens survive and the ship slowly begins to repair itself. After Jared tells Elaine that the alien light made him feel powerful, he is adamant that safety must be found outside. Oliver wants to stay inside and tries restraining him. Jared physically starts changing, lifts Oliver off the floor, and vows to protect his family. The U.S. Navy fleet arrives off the coast and helicopters land soldiers on nearby rooftops. Jared and Elaine go to the rooftop, hoping to catch a ride to safety. Oliver and Cannon stay in the condominium, but are found when Cannon accidentally exposes herself to the light and is abducted by a squid alien, with both being blown up by soldiers on a nearby roof soon afterwards. Oliver attempts to kill a tanker alien by turning on the gas stove and igniting a lighter, causing the room to explode. The soldiers are thrown off the roof by the aliens, and a squid alien attacks Jared and Elaine. The badly injured Jared kills it. The couple accepts their fate, looks into the blue light, and are sucked into the mothership. The naval vessels off the coast are shown burning and sinking. A brief montage of cities such as London, Vegas, Hong Kong, and New York City show that all have succumbed to the invasion, and the aliens have appeared to one. However, inside the alien ship, Elaine wakes on a pile of human bodies. Tubes are sucking human brains into machines. Probes go through the pile looking for what they can find. Elaine sees Jared in that pile, but has to watch helplessly as his brain is removed. She is probed and transported to a chamber with other pregnant women. She watches as another pregnant woman has her baby removed and dies. Meanwhile, Jared's brain, glowing red, is inserted into a new alien body, animating the body. Jared seems to retain control and comes to the aid of Elaine, who recognizes him when he caresses her belly and her head. He then turns around to confront the advancing aliens, and in the credits of still images depict Jared protecting Elaine and their child from the aliens. End of movie. Lacey?
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out if this is a good movie. I definitely don't think it's a happy film. It's a very interesting film. I'm going through some of the images here for those of you that might be listening to on a podcast or if you're watching on YouTube. Strange looking aliens. The concept of the light is interesting. These aliens were pretty creepy looking. The setup was creepy. The whole ending with the brain coming out, but he still has memories of who he is. Yeah, Lacey, let's talk Skyline.
Okay, here we go. It's basically the light, I think, is what would happen. I feel like this, if this was playing out underwater, this would be a bunch of like guppies and then anglerfish.
Yeah,
you know, with that little light thing that hangs.
Yeah,
it just like it, freaks them out, and then they become prey. So it's just, it's like a little sedative or something. Interesting listening to the commentaries. There's two commentaries on this. One is the director, and then the other one, it was the director and one of the producers, and then the other one is another producer and one of the special effects guys.
One of the VFX guys, yeah.
So the reason you get this tiny little independent film with a very low budget, and then you end up with these amazing special effects, is because the guys who worked on this, they were the guys who were behind the CG for Avatar, 300, Iron Man 1 or 2 or something like that. They've worked on a ton. They are CG artists. So basically they got their budget together, and then once they were finished making the movie, they were able to go spend all this time themselves putting in all that CGI.
So I'm going to stop you there because I want to talk about that, but this goes into the box office with this film too, because this the filming of this film only cost $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
The digital effects costed an additional $10 million. The film itself was completely financed by the Strauss brothers without the assistance of any major studio. It opened on November 12, 2010, and grossed just almost $5 million on its opening day. When it came out, it grossed a total of just a little over 11.5 million over its opening weekend, for a 3-day average of about 4,000 per theater, and ranking number 4 for the weekend behind Megamind at number 1, Unstoppable at number 2, and Due Date at number 3. That's an interesting mix of movies right there. As of January 13th, the film had made just over $21 million in the United States and about $47 million internationally, for almost $70 million worldwide. So this was not your ordinary how we're going to make a movie.
Right. I think that when they say $10 million worth of special effects, I think that came on the back end. I think that they did that on spec. Like, there was a little bit of conversation about it in one of the interviews, but I was trying to make sure I watched everything, because I watched the two of the 3 sequels. The third one is coming. It's interesting. Okay, first of all, this being the film that ends with, maybe a not so up ending. That's not how they thought of it. They thought of it as he was willing to, even as the monster that he was put into, his brain was put into, he was able to survive, like his brain, his will. Anyway, the original goal was this was going to be the prequel, and that there were going to be 3 movies to follow.
Lacey, I just want to throw in Ghostbusters quick response here. The effects in Skyline were certainly impressive, but I never cared about the characters, which is important for me to like a movie. That's a good point. We're going to get to that in a little bit.
I liked. Okay, so when it comes to, do I want to answer that, or do we want to just continue? Okay, so as far as the commentary is concerned, the goal was that this would be kind of perceived as like the prequel of, as opposed to starting out when it's, post-apocalyptic, which is a lot of things were post-apocalyptic at that point, right? You had a lot of that kind of stuff, but these guys, they're very clear in the commentaries about, like, they were very clear that they knew they were pulling from Alien and Terminator 2 and even like the sequel, they were pulled from like Jurassic Park, like all their favorite movies. They were like, oh, what if they did this like they did it in there, and what if we did, and then we could do that, and like, you remember how they did that in this movie? And so this is just the nice thing about this. The thing that makes me love these movies is that you can tell by the film, by the commentaries, by any of the conversations, by all the bloopers and the interviews and stuff, they had so much fun making this movie. This is about dudes who just really like movies, making a movie that's just what they want to see on screen. And that's the most fun way to make a movie. That to me, that's the most fun movie to watch, is like the movie that, I have a bunch of friends who work in the film industry a lot. They're all into like horror movies, and they love making the horror movies that they want to see. And they all do really well. I don't watch the movies, but I always buy a ticket so I can be like, look, I supported you. Because I can't watch the movies but they have a blast making their movies. And I think that that's part of why they do so well at the box office. This is a tiny movie that could. This is, all of a sudden it was like these 3 guys who kind of crept out of the FX game and decided that they were going to see what they could do and throw together a script and get everything done. And they pulled every favor they had. The hotel, or the apartment was like one of the guys' apartments. Like that was one of the spare bedrooms. They used one of the other guys. His car was the Phantom, Phantom Rolls Royce. All that, and they just really enjoyed it. And I think that that's part of why I enjoyed watching the movies, because I could tell how much fun that they had making it.
Okay. Before we give kind of our thoughts on the film itself, I want
Sure.
to talk about some of the critical response from other places here
Okay.
of Skyline. So Rotten Tomatoes gives Skyline an approval rating of 15% based off of 86 reviews with an average rating of 3.6 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads a middling sci-fi entry. Skyline offers proof that solid special effects alone cannot overcome a flat storyline filled with uninspired dialogue. Writing in Variety, Joe Layden panned the film. Imagine a Kmart smash up of Transformers and Independence Day, and you're appropriately primed for Skyline, an underwhelming and derivative sci-fi thriller that's only marginally more impressive than a run-of-the-mill sci-fi channel telepic. And finally, Scree Rant's Ben Kendrick wrote that the film comes across as a big screen B movie with a convoluted plot and too limited of a scope to make the audience feel the worldwide alien apocalypse that's supposed to be unfolding in the film. So,
Okay.
Lacey, I'll be honest with you. I did not see this movie in the theaters. It was gone too quick before I really got it. I did finally see it when it came out on DVD. My feeling on this film was one, even though I like the people who are in this film, kind of like what Ghostbusters Quick Response Unit did. I never felt truly invested with the characters because I felt like there were just chunks of the story that were missing. And I think for me, the thing that ultimately put me in a bad spot coming out of it was there should have been 20 more minutes onto this film. This film is barely 90 minutes. It's like they should have, we would have gotten instead of getting these stills and the credits of what happened, if we would have actually gotten those as scenes, I think the movie ends stronger and ends people on a feeling a little bit higher note. But because of the way this movie ends, I know a lot of people were just generally confused. Like, what just happened? I'm not quite sure what just happened. And I think that's kind of the issue with Skyline for me as a film is that you feel like there's so much more to the story you should have gotten in this film. It was like, if you would have given me 10 more minutes of just something to make me care about these characters a little bit more and maybe understand what's going on. And we're going to talk about that. We are judging Scott. Remember, we are judging this. Yeah. Well, but we are judging this film based off of what this film was when it came out. And it's that status for Oblivion. We're going to get to that because I think that's an interesting part of our Oblivion conversation. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of how I felt like. It's like I felt like I watched an interesting idea, but not a complete film. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So where were you? Did you see this in the theaters? And okay. And before we go any further, we must preference Lacey's love for Eric Balfour.
Oh, 100%. I'm pretty sure at this point I have everything he's ever done that has been offered on Blu-ray or DVD. It's a significant chunk of. He's done a lot of independent films, like a lot.
I just want to preference. I love him in the show Haven.
Haven's fantastic. That's actually the only Stephen King show. Like he's the reason because I can't do Stephen King. Like I just can't do it. And not that he's not a fantastic writer. I don't like horror. I don't like being afraid, and he's really good at that. So no, thank you. But Haven, he's the only reason that I watched that show. And I just absolutely fell in love with the show. And I loved his character. He's fantastic. He was the first, like when you boil it down, he was the first member of the Scooby Gang to die on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And that was Joss Whedon's way of saying like no one is safe.
Yeah.
He was he's the most pivotal character of that first 2 episodes of Joss Whedon saying, okay, this is the way I do things. Nobody is safe. That took on a different connotation later, but we're not gonna talk about that. I've followed him through all of his stuff. He's been in so many fun things. He had a nice arc on the funeral home, 6 Feet Under, lots of crazy stuff. So we'll watch him read a phone book.
So let's get into Skyline here. What were your initial thoughts on it what was the first time you see it? Did you see it in the theaters? Was it DVD?
Yes,
Was it?
I saw it in the theaters. I think I saw it several times in the theaters. When it came down to the ending that everyone didn't like, I didn't have any problem with it. I loved it. I loved the fact that it left it wide open for a sequel or sequels, which I was very happy when I got the DVD back in the day, to listen to the commentary and see that there were going to be some sequels. And I had forgotten that had happened. I had forgotten that I had listened to the commentary and that there were going to be sequels, and we were talking about it a while back, and you said, "Hey, why don't you pick an Oblivion?" And I gave you a list of a whole bunch of ones. I kind of went down I went through the library, and I was like, "Well, what do we got?" Because I have a lot of Oblivion movies here, like, seriously. And I was like, "Oh, Skyline would be a good one." And when we started talking about it, I started kind of looking into it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. There's several sequels, and third one is the fourth." The fourth one, the third sequel is supposed to be coming out pretty soon.
2025. It's scheduled for 2025, and
yeah,
like I said, we're going to talk about all those sequels too, because
but I loved the fact that it ended like with a weird thing. So first of all, kidnapped on an alien ship, like that leaves so much crazy stuff to go on. I mean, they talk about very specifically, like they talked about how they were totally stealing straight from, or homage, not theft, homage.
Yeah, there's Independence Day, V.
Yeah,
a lot of things.
But the thing is, I loved how that happened. Everybody was so mad that it ended with him becoming one of the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chappie comes out in like 2016. Not Chappie. What's the one with
District 9? District
9 comes out, and when was that? Was that 2012?
I don't know. 2012, 2013.
I just really, like, when District 9 came out, everybody was like, "That's so amazing!" At the end, and I was like,
actually, District 9 came out before this. District 9 was in 2009.
Okay, right. Okay, so there we go. So why was it okay for District 9, but it wasn't okay for Skyline? Like, I just was like,
I think, okay, so I'm gonna say why, because this is what I feel. You got invested into the character in District 9.
Yeah, but I hate District 9. It's like one of those movies that I just don't like.
But you had time to get invested in Charlita Copley's character. Where with this film, I think it's one of the weaknesses of it, and I don't necessarily say it's the actor's fault, because I think it's some of the writing's fault. There's none of these characters that you can just feel like you can attach yourself to. Yes, you're a huge fan of Eric Balfour. There's an attachment there, but I think for the average person, you don't have enough time with any of these characters, or enough real insight to any of these characters to truly be like, okay, I'm emotionally invested into these characters.
The reason I think that is a little bit off the... Okay, so if you have ever... I don't know. I've lived in LA. I lived in LA for a minute. And let me just tell you that the characters that are not Scotty Thompson and Eric Balfour perfectly show a lot of the people that I knew in LA. Very much a who's gonna, like, what have you done for me lately kind of thing. Very much, paying attention to, specific things, and not really giving a lot of emotion, not really giving a lot of the way the characters were portrayed. I think portrayed a certain stereotype of LA folks. Not all people in LA are like that. It's totally, but there's a specific kind of stereotype for people who are like in the industry or whatever. And they didn't. I think you're supposed to connect mostly with Scotty's character, because she was the one who was like, kind of everything was kind of throwing her for a loop, because, it was just supposed to be a trip to go visit some friends. And then,
she finds out she's pregnant. All this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, here we have an alien invasion out of nowhere.
Well, but on top of it, she doesn't know that. Well, in Eric Balfour's character, Jared, he didn't know that he was going to be offered, to move out there, a position with the company and all this kind of stuff. So all of a sudden she's like, wait a minute, did you come out here? What are you doing? I'm pregnant. We can't do that, And so she's trying to figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, look, aliens. We have to deal with this very real thing where we're going to potentially die. And none of that matters anymore. But she still, like, nothing else matters, but she still has to take care of the baby. Like, that's the whole thing. And the fact of the matter is that the aliens were dissecting. They were pulling women into the craziness, and they were, like you said, they were taking the brains out of men, but they were actually, like, any woman who was pregnant, they were pulling them. They didn't pull the brains. They just trying to dissect the babies to see.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of that is kind of explained in the sequel, so I don't want to get too far into that. But yeah, so it's a matter of him being able to overcome the will of the whatnots. But the other thing is, there's a very specific thing that happens with his character, with Jared's character, is that he is pulled into the light and then pulled out 3 different times prior to going up into the ship, and that is in the subsequent viewings and then listening to the commentary. That is the reason
He maintains not getting brainwashed.
Yes. So there are some, there's some reasons behind the things. I like the fact that his character was kind of a jerk, and that he did redeem himself by literally giving his life and then protecting her afterwards.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, I think again, like I said, for me, and I think for a lot of people that I've talked to about this film and stuff, it's that frustrating aspect of there's something interesting there, but they didn't dive deep enough in it to sell it per se for a lot of people, and I think that's one of the Oblivion issues with this. But there's some other things too, Lacey, and I was doing in my research. I came across this movie had some pretty interesting legal issues with it as well, and I found this fascinating because in August 2010, it was reported that Sony Pictures Entertainment was contemplating legal action against the Strauss brothers, the directors of Skyline, and the owners of Hydrolux Films. Sony paid Hydrolux to generate visual effects for the movie Battle Los Angeles, but Hydrolux never informed Sony the siblings were directing a rival Alien feature similarly driven by special effects scheduled for release 4 months prior to Sony's feature. A representative for the Strauss issued a statement. Any claims of improperty are completely baseless. This is a blatant attempt by Sony to force these independent filmmakers to move a release date that has long been set by Universal and relatively is outside the filmmakers' control. On March 17th, Sony released a statement dismissing its arbitration against Hydrolux and the Strauss brothers, saying that after the discovery phase, they were satisfied that none of the Battle Los Angeles visual effects were used in Skyline. The Strauss brothers stated, "We're glad to put this behind us. We've been honored to work on several wonderful Sony Picture Entertainment projects in the past and look forward to future collaborations." So, I think this is part of the conversation that we need to have with this Saved by Oblivion, because there was these legal issues that kind of messed with the release date. But when you think about it, you had a lot of similar movies come out in about this 4 or 5 year period, because you had Skyline, you had District 9, you had Cloverfield, which came out in 2008, which there's a lot of things in Cloverfield that are very similar to aspects of Skyline. And then you did have Battle Los Angeles come out, which is very, very similar in aspects. LA, alien invasion, yes, different perspectives. And, I think when most people think about the alien invasion films that come out at that time, Battle Los Angeles is the one that stands out. It's the one that gets a lot of play on cable. And, Aaron Eckhart being in it is a big, big deal. I think Skyline kind of got lost in that minutia a little bit of all these similar type films coming out at the same time, because it didn't have quite the star power or like something like a Cloverfield, which was kind of had that Blair Witch feeling going on to it. Obviously, J.J. Abrams being behind it. So I think Skyline kind of did get lost in some of that minutia of all these similar type films coming out at the same time.
I think that the big difference with Battle Los Angeles versus Skyline is that you had an active military, like you were literally seeing it from the military's point of view in Battle Los Angeles. You're seeing people who are actively fighting the aliens, as opposed to Skyline, where they literally wake up in the morning and there's like 9 people left. Like there's no fighting. Like Donald Faison has a gun at one point where he's just literally just like firing into the sky. Like, I don't know what's happening. This is crazy. It's, and the other thing is there are 6 characters in this movie. When you look at it, you might have 25 after the extras from the party, what I mean? And so when you look at the number of people you're following, when you have a group of 6 people, you had the couple plus the host couple plus his assistant plus the manager of the hotel. Like that's it. You got 6 people you're following, and Donald Faison, he gets just he's out like 20 minutes.
Truthfully, your biggest name actor at the time is out of the film within the first 20 minutes of the film.
Right. And that's kind of, I mean, not for nothing, but that's kind of a Joss Whedon move. Like, you know, and he was specifically saying, like, we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that no one is safe because we didn't want anyone to expect, you know, the final girl situation.
Yeah.
And so, which is kind of interesting because there was a final girl. Technically, she's not in great shape at the end, but she's not dead yet. So it's an interesting look at what would happen if just average people were like, oh no, what, that's not good, huh? You know, and there, like I said, you know, there's 6 people in this movie, and it's one of those things where, you know, 2 people want to run and hide, 2 people want to like take the fight to them, 2 people want to like go find more people, and then 2, you know, it's kind of, there's a lot of different opinions as to what to do, and they work it out. They make some decisions. People die, people don't die, people, you know, go their different ways. So it's an interesting look at how just sort of what to do when chaos hits, and there is no structure for doing the thing, you know?
Well, there's another interesting aspect to this film, and we've kind of hinted at it a little bit. Okay. And I have a question for you, Lacey. Sure. If somebody makes a sequel in the middle of the forest, does anybody actually see it? This movie, you're like, wait a minute, Kyle, how can Skyline be part of Oblivion when it is spawned not 1, not 2, but 3 sequels? One which is filming now, and yeah, this movie has had some sequels because we had Beyond Skyline and Skylines. Now, let's get into a little history of these sequels real quick. I've got some notes here. May 2014, at the annual Cannes Film Festival, it was revealed that a sequel entitled Beyond Skyline was planned to go into production, but without the Strauss brothers as the writers and directors. Instead, Skyline co-producer and co-writer Liam O'Donnell was brought on board and marking his directorial debut. The film was released in the United States on December 15, 2017. The third film in the trilogy, Skylines, was released on December 18, 2020. And in January 2024, it was announced XYZ Films had acquired the international rights to the 4th Skyline film titled Skyline Warpath. Now, let's talk about Beyond Skyline, which is the sequel and the second installment in the Skyline film series. This film is actually set concurrently with the events of the first film. So that's where things, up to a point, yes. Sure. But that's where things get even more confusing. You had Frank Grillo in this film. You have a different actress playing the Elaine character in this and Jared. Film.
And Jared.
So for about the first half of this film, it runs concurrent with the Skyline movie. And then things merge together. You see the return of the Elaine character, obviously played by a different actress, and Jared in his pilot, what they end up calling pilot alien suit with his brain implanted in it. This film then goes on to spawn a second sequel, Skylines, which came out in 2020. I don't remember. I don't believe Beyond Skyline might have had a very limited theatrical release run. Skylines went directly to Apple Plus streaming, and then a few other streaming services as well. Then they are currently filming Skyline Warpath. And if nothing else, guys, the thing I'm going to say about Skyline Warpath, it's going to have plenty of action in it because you have Iko Uwais from the Raid films, and he was actually in the first Skyline sequel. Not a big part, but he was in it. And Scott Adkins, who is a great martial artist, had a phenomenal role in the last John Wick film. Kevin, if you're watching still, I know you love you some Scott Adkins. So this movie's going to have some great action in it. But Lacey, yes, I'm going to ask you, we have this film for Oblivion, yet it has sequels. But the truth of it is, most people didn't even know these sequels existed.
Right. And, you know, I don't know what to tell you. I managed to end up with all 3. So yay me.
Well, that's because it's you and you're the queen of movie foo.
Yes. I will say I think that they are when you talk about specifically the 2 sequels that are already out, so the first film was On Earth, alien invasion, oh no, how do we survive, right? Second film takes place entirely on the ship, back on Earth, trying to escape from the ship, figure out what's going on. It's kind of the back half of Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're on the ship. The Frank Grillo's character and his son and their whole crew ends up on the ship. They meet up with the Elaine and
Jared
characters, and they do the thing and the whatnot. And it boils down to the baby is born, the mother dies. Jared's character basically makes a deal with Frank Grillo's character and says, he says, if you help me find my son, I'll take your baby off this ship and make sure that she's okay.
Yeah.
The baby has an accelerated growth rate, which is kind of a Twilight thing, or whatever the fourth Twilight movie is, which is fine. So by the end of, and we don't have to go into all the specifics, it's fun to watch. It's a fun movie to watch. Even if you know the storylines, the general storylines, it's really fun. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of like great fights in second and third films. They're very much, you can tell that they took they took the information that they learned from the first film and made some changes so that it was more, I think, audience, positive. But yeah, so first film, On Earth, oh no, we're stuck on a spaceship. Second film, oh no, we're stuck on a spaceship, let's get back to Earth. Third film, baby grows up, we're taking it to the alien planet. Right? So we're going all the way. Okay, so they've had 3 separate locations for these 3 films. I think the 4th film is going to be interesting. I can't wait to see if they're going to.
I know from what I read online, the 4th film takes place 5 years after the events of the 3rd film.
Okay, which is interesting because the first film, like we said, it's kind of concurrent. Like the first 20 minutes or so is kind of like.
Yeah, I'd say basically the first half of it is pretty much concurrent with the original film.
Yeah, well, at least until they see what's. Yeah, okay. So then, with the second film ending, it does like a little jump at the end of the film, so you see the adult character, and it's like 3 years later or something like that. So she super accelerated growth rate. So then the next film is, I think, 3 years later, 4 years later, something like that, where they're on Earth dealing with things, and it's one of those kind of commando situations where they capture her and tell her that they need her to do one last job.
Yeah. And just so people understand too, at the end of, I think it's the end of the second film, they do make peace with at least the aliens that are on the planet.
Yes. Well, they managed to successfully detether them. They're not under the control of the main angry jerk guy, the main angry robot, or the angry alien who's trying to like murder everybody. So all of the brains that were in these pilot forms are now human brains. So it's basically that they weren't under control anymore. So basically now they're human brains inside these pilot machines. So they're not. It's not that they made peace. It's just that they went back to their former.
Yeah, they basically unbrainwashed them.
Right. Yeah.
So again, so this comes to an interesting question for me as far as Oblivion.
Okay.
You have obviously somebody saw enough in this to make sequels. And when I look at Oblivion, most of the time the films we talk about don't have sequels, or maybe it's something really awful. None of these sequels did great. Most of them were direct to video or something along those lines. And when I look at the first sequel, Beyond Skyline, in ways it almost does feel like it's their attempt to reset the story and kind of get the story on the track of the story they wanted to tell. Because you basically wipe out any surviving characters from the first film and kind of take it in a particular direction. It's like, okay, we have what it honestly felt like, because you didn't have the original writers and directors back. You had this one producer who wrote the second film. It was like, okay, we're going to kind of wipe out the events of this first film as far as the characters and stuff like that. They were kind of meaningless, and we're going to kind of set this on the path we thought we're you really wanted to take it with the second film, because I did not because of how they did the second film with the concurrent and adding all these new characters and things like that. It just, and probably at that point they knew they probably weren't getting Eric Balfour back. They weren't getting anybody from the original film back.
Right.
And I think that had an impact on it too. I think what ultimately happens here with Skyline is that there's an interesting story to tell there. And I think because we were in an age of people streaming was starting to pick up more and things like that, and people were looking for content for streaming, they took this concept and ran with it for streaming. And
right. Yep.
So, and I think that's where like more modern stuff, it's hard to debate saving from Oblivion, because there's so many people who are looking for IP for their streaming services that they're grabbing these obscure things and trying to reinvent them or just get them out there again. So
I kind of feel like I feel like this kind of mirrors how The Walking Dead happened, right? You had the original series came out, then like 5 seasons in, they did the Fear the Walking Dead, and Fear the Walking Dead starts at the beginning, like even before Walking Dead starts, right? So you have them do a time jump and they catch up, right? And then you have World Beyond, where you don't know exactly where it's placed in the timeline, but you know things are happening here and things are happening there, and this will be how it goes, but this might be, and we don't know what the timeline is. But I kind of feel like that's the second film. I think that a section of it was concurrent, but the thing is, the guy who wrote and directed the sequels, he was part of the writing team on the first one and part of the production team. So while he didn't direct, I don't know where that direct. While he didn't direct it, he was heavily involved because it was just 3 guys. He was one of the 3 guys. Yeah. So he did have some input in the original, and I think that's, when they knew that they couldn't get X number of people back, they took a left turn, like they have to do anytime a character doesn't come back, an actor doesn't come back. I mean, how many times has that been done?
Yeah. But I think in the case here, and I think The Walking Dead, especially Fear the Walking Dead, is a good analogy, because Fear the Walking Dead was not that popular of a show when it first started. People were really getting into it. Then they did the time jump, and they brought in Lenny James, and they really changed up the cast. They pretty much wiped out
everything.
Yeah. They wiped out pretty much most of the original cast except for a couple of people, and people really then got popular with The Walking Dead. I think Skyline is kind of in a similar aspect where, okay, we had this film with a really interesting concept. It didn't quite take off, but there was somebody there who was able to sell the idea to somebody else and revamp it somewhat, and really based off of what they had, a framework they had, but they were still able to revamp it and build on it to create enough interest to generate 3 more sequels, obviously. Yeah. So this brings in the debate to me, Lacey, about Skyline and Save from Oblivion. Should Skyline even be considered for Oblivion? And I think where it falls, why it's in this Oblivion thing, is because people didn't know about these sequels. These are like real big sci-fi heads knew about this, but the general public I watched this film, whatever, and done, and moved on to the next thing. Didn't even care about these sequels, where people like us who are, science fiction, we're going to be a little bit more aware of it. But I think it is an Oblivion because, again, people just didn't know. And I think people saw it and they were done with it, and they had moved on to the next thing because there were so many similar type films. And then, we're talking about getting into the Marvel franchise, Star Wars returning, all these other things. And I think Skyline just kind of, it went by the wayside, maybe with a very small cult following that it had. And again, I'm not going to say Skyline's a bad movie, because I don't believe it's a bad film. It's just a kind of like what I said with Borderlands. It's a film that's there. And again, I'm just speaking for myself personally here, and for other people. I would say, interesting concept, amazing visual effects. It didn't go enough into its lore in the first film that it made me want to go, okay, I want more of this world. Right. And then when we got more of it and they explore it with some of the sequels, again, there's interesting stuff there. Are they the greatest films? No. Come on, they're basically direct-to-video films. Let's be honest. Let's be honest here. However, I am very intrigued by Skyline Warpath because you have Iko Uwais in it and Scott Adkins in it. Two people who you're going to get phenomenal action films from. So I am very curious about that. So I think for me, at the end of the day, there's a reason to keep Skyline around. But Lacey, I know you love the film, but it's definitely very bizarre history to it, and it's very bizarre because I really do. I think you can even agree with me. It did get lost in the ether for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, I watched the movie on DVD. I listened to the commentary. They did tell me in the commentary that they were planning sequels. And I didn't know about them when they came out until we literally started talking about doing this podcast. I bought these 2 sequels in the past month. Like, I found them. Well, I think I had Skylines that I saw one day, and I was like, what? When did they? Okay, yay. And so I didn't realize that Skylines wasn't the second one. So when I started getting a little bit further into it, making sure, because you said, yeah, I think there's 3 of them, and I was like, what? Okay. And I think I said something about like this being the God, what's the name of that movie? Topic. Cutting Edge.
Oh, Cutting Edge, yes.
Like, everyone loved the first movie. Well, at least I did. Loved the first movie, and then there's been 4 sequels to The Cutting Edge. Who knew? And it's the same story 4 times in a row, like, or 5 times in a row, which is fine, but who knew that there were 4 sequels to The Cutting Edge?
Well, I mean, come on, Sniper 10, I think, is due out any time now.
Right? Tom Berenger or Billy Zane in something, and it's going to have 19, sequels, which is fine. And if I can find them, or if I know that they exist, I will watch them. I love Billy Zane. I love Tom Berenger. But if I don't know that, it's just some of these things come out so fast, and they're on streaming, and I have like a love-hate thing with streaming because whatever. I want to have physical media in my hand. I don't like paying for something that I don't have, because that seems so counterintuitive to me. I know, I'm an old fogey. It's fine. I have come to grips with this. But you see, I have things to grip. So, if I find these things, I'm happy to watch them. I just want, and that's like what I was saying with Skeleton Crew earlier. Like, it's going to be great. I'm very excited about it, but Disney doesn't release a lot of things on digital media or physical media. Netflix, I've got 2 seasons of Stranger Things. The rest of them are not available on DVD Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Why? The first 2 seasons were. Come on, guys. So yeah, I think that this was something where I'm a big fan of the original, and I had no idea that the sequels had come out. I knew to expect them, but they were not advertised. There was no campaign. I didn't do streaming when the first one came out. This first sequel came out. I was actively avoiding streaming at that point. Now I've broken down, and I only watch streaming if I'm not at home. But anyway, so yeah, I think that this is something. Maybe we should classify this as a hidden gem, as opposed to
So then I think it's safe to say you are saving Skyline from it.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I'm saving Skyline, and it's definitely a buy it, obviously. For me.
So I think for me, at the end of the day, it's not a great film for me, but I also think it's a film that suffers from neglect. I think it got lost up in a lot of minutia. I think you have sequels out there, and because for whatever reason they weren't marketed, and they weren't, it was hard to become aware of these films. I think there's an interesting concept there. I think the biggest thing is for the original Skyline film, and I've come back to it again and again, is just the aspect of you didn't give me, you needed to build your world a little bit more. You needed to build your characters a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And again, this is one of those movies that it's great that it's 90 minutes. You could have put another 20 minutes in it, and it probably becomes a so much better film.
And the funny thing is, there were like 20, 25 minutes of deleted scenes.
Yeah. And so I also look at it and applaud it, because this was basically an independent film with a big visual effects budget. And So I think it should be saved from Oblivion. I think it kind of saves itself from Oblivion by the aspect that it has spun off a couple of sequels already, and then you add in a fourth sequel coming with Scott Adkins and Eco, and I think you get a lot of people's attention with those two names. That you are at least
Yeah.
bringing in the action film crowd. You're bringing in the lethal mullet crowd, shall we say?
Do we know? Do you know? Have we seen if it's? You said it was. You said you bought it. Is it going to be streaming or is it going to be?
All I've heard is released in 2025 at this point.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's it. So I do think it is a save it from Oblivion film because it maybe should have never. It never should have been put into position to be even considered for Oblivion, to be honest. But again, for a lot of reasons, I think it got there by some neglect and just by being lost in things. So I think pull it back out again. I will say this though. If you are going to watch Skyline, watch the sequels because I think the sequels make it a more complete, give you a much better picture and build on that. And I think what you see is a classic case of the sequels trying to rectify some of the mistakes they made in the first film. So the first film gives you a small basis, but the second and third film really build the world. And I think so it's a little bit backwards. I almost think you could have, if you would have gone with the second film as the first film and then done Skyline as kind of a prequel film, you get more people probably putting their eyes on it. That's just my thought process, but we'll see what happens. But that is going to wrap things up for Oblivion. We think we've saved another film, but what do you think out there? Let us know. But guys, you have been watching Culture Clash here on the Fandom Podcast Network, and we thank you so much for joining us on our YouTube live broadcast. Ghostbusters, of course, Kevin popping in from Australia. We know the time difference there, everything like that. And hopefully, by the next Culture Clash, I think Mr. Rice will be back with us to bring his interesting takes as always. And speaking of the next Culture Clash, we are continuing our time travel spotlight, Lacey, and we are looking at the time machine of 2002 and the Samantha Mumba of it all.
Yes, and I also have the original time machine, so you should expect a little bit of conversation about the differences between the two.
There's definitely a lot of there's similarities, but there's a lot of difference. But yeah, I actually watched this movie recently on cable, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, Lacey. I was getting Avatar vibes from it in certain aspects.
I guess I can see that.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that, but yes, we will. When the next Culture Clash does arrive, we will be back to our time travel spotlight in the year of time travel here at the Fandom Podcast Network. So it's the time machine from 2002. In the meantime, you have been listening to Culture Clash here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network here on our YouTube channel. If you've been watching this, please give us a like, give us a subscribe, share us out. If you're listening to us on the audio podcast, of course, on our master feed at fpn.podbean.com. Of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio. So many wonderful things out there. Of course, we have a great Facebook page as well. Lacey, where can people find you on the socials these days?
I'm in all the places. Big Sky and Threads and X and Facebook and Letterboxd, and I think I'm missing one, but I don't know. As Lacey Pants, LACEE Pants. And then I am the Lacey Pants on Instagram because I locked myself out of Lacey Pants and I can't figure out how to get it back. So that's me. Yay.
Of course, and Kevin, who has popped in back from Australia. Hopefully he's not too upside down in the land down under. A little stranger things might be happening, but he's looking forward to the time machine and that show. And also, good job by you, Kevin. We always add that in. Two, for me, you can find me, Kyle, on Facebook, Kyle Wagner. You can find me on the Facebook group page as well. You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW. You can find me on Discord at AKyleW. You can find me on Threads and Instagram at AKyleFandom. Of course, too, it's been fun talking Skyline with you, Lacey, and I'm glad you picked this movie because I think it's been an interesting conversation and it's an interesting Oblivion type of film in aspects we've never really dealt with in Saved by Oblivion before. A movie with sequels and things of that nature. So, but for everybody out there who's been listening, I just want to tell you, you know what? no matter what's going on. Here, it's about fandom. It's about whether we like it or not. You know what? We're here to enjoy it and love our fandoms. And there's no such thing as a wrong fandom. There's just being a fan, and there's nothing wrong with being a fan of whatever it is you love. As we say around here, respect each other, and most importantly, enjoy your fandom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have done this thing, and we are out of here.